All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep inside the human brain to really understand one of the most powerful biological systems we have, the one that controls our appetite over the long haul. And let me tell you, this isn't about willpower, it's about wiring. So, to get why this is so important, we really have to start with the sheer scale of the issue. See, obesity isn't some kind of personal failing. It has become a full-blown global public health crisis, and it's fundamentally changing the health of our societies. Just think about this number for a second. Right now, more than 2 billion people around the world are considered overweight or obese. That number is already mind-boggling, but it's not stopping. Some forecasts are suggesting that by 2030, that could be nearly 60% of all adults on the entire planet.
So how in the world does our body regulate its weight? I mean, it must have a system, right? Well, to get to the bottom of it, we're going to break the science down into 5 key parts. We'll start with our fat cells and go all the way up to the command center in our brain.
Okay, let's dive right in. Before we can really get into the biology, we need to be crystal clear on what we're actually talking about. What's the clinical definition of the challenge we're facing?
So, at its very core, the clinical definition of obesity is pretty straightforward. It's about having an excessive amount of body fat. The technical term is adipose tissue, relative to your height, and it's at a point where it can start to negatively impact your health.
And to measure this, clinicians will often use something called the Body Mass Index, or BMI. It's basically a classification system that helps them assess a person's weight status and the associated risks of other health conditions, what they call comorbidities.
And this, right here, brings us to the central question. I mean, if it were really as simple as that old saying, eat less, move more, we would not be in this situation. The real answer is way more complex, and it's buried deep inside our own biology.
So let's get to the first major piece of this biological puzzle. And it starts in a place you might not expect at all, our body's own fat tissue.
For the longest time, we all thought of fat as just this passive storage depot for extra calories. But it turns out that's completely wrong. It is a highly active, incredibly intelligent endocrine organ. It works like a sophisticated sensor, constantly taking readings of our body's long-term energy reserves.
So how does it talk to the rest of the body? Well, when our energy stores, our body fat, go up, this tissue starts pumping out a really powerful hormone called leptin. You can think of leptin as a long-term status report that gets sent directly to the brain, basically saying, hey, command center, just so you know, we've got plenty of energy stored up down here.
So where exactly does this leptin report get delivered? Well, for that, we have to go straight into the brain's main control room for appetite.
Okay, so deep inside the brain, there's a structure called the hypothalamus. This is the master regulator of appetite. And within the hypothalamus, there's this tiny but absolutely critical region called the arcuate nucleus, or ARC. This is the primary mailroom, the receiving station, for all those hormonal signals coming from the body, including leptin. Now, inside the arc, there is this fascinating biological tug-of-war happening between 2 opposite sets of neurons. On one side, you have what we can call the GO neurons. Their technical name is NPY/AGRP neurons, and they are incredibly powerful at driving hunger. On the other side, you have the STOP neurons, or POMC/CART neurons, and they do the exact opposite. They signal fullness and shut down appetite. Together, these 2 groups form a kind of biological hunger switch.
So this is where it all comes together. How do these hormones and these dueling neurons actually talk to each other to control our desire to eat? Not just over years, but moment by moment, day by day.
This is a brilliant illustration of how the whole system works. When leptin arrives at that arcuate nucleus from your fat cells, it does 2 things at once. First, it powerfully stimulates the STOP neurons, those POMC neurons, and at the exact same time, it puts the brakes on the GO neurons, the NPY/AGRP ones. So what's the result? Your appetite goes down, and you actually start burning more energy.
And if you ever want to see just how ridiculously powerful this one single hormone is, just look at this picture. On the right, you have a normal, healthy mouse. On the left is what's called an OB/OB mouse. It's been genetically engineered so it cannot produce any leptin at all. And without that crucial stop signal, it becomes hyperphagic. It just cannot stop eating, and it develops severe obesity. It's just a stunning visual proof of how critical this system is.
Okay, but leptin is the long-term signal. What about that short-term feeling of hunger that tells you, hey, it's lunchtime? Well, that's driven by a completely different hormone, ghrelin.
You can see on this chart how ghrelin, which is released by your stomach, spikes right before a meal. It's the primary trigger that tells you to start eating. Ghrelin is basically the yin to leptin's yang. While leptin presses the brakes on those go neurons, ghrelin slams on the accelerator. It travels up to the brain and directly activates those powerful NPY/AGRP hunger neurons, sending an urgent message that says, it is time to eat now.
So when you see how incredibly complex and fine-tuned this whole system is, you can start to understand that for a lot of people, obesity isn't just about behavior. Sometimes it's caused by broken biological hardware.
In some rare cases, something called monogenic obesity can happen. This is when a mutation in one single gene is enough to completely derail the entire system. And just look at the genes involved, they're the exact same players we've just been talking about. Leptin, its receptor, and key parts of that stop pathway like POMC.
And this right here, this might be the most crucial piece of the genetic puzzle. Remember those POMC stop neurons? Well, when they get activated, they release a signal. That signal needs to plug into a specific receptor called MC4R to actually suppress your appetite. As this quote points out, mutations in this one single receptor are the most common known genetic cause of severe obesity. It just proves how absolutely vital that biological stop signal is.
So, after all of this, what does it all mean? It means we have this incredibly powerful, ancient biological system that is heavily wired to prevent us from starving by driving us to find food. And for millennia, that system saved us. The challenge, the modern challenge, is that we now have to navigate that exact same wiring in a world of unprecedented food abundance. And understanding this system, well, that's the first step to meeting that challenge.